Super Bowl spread. It's about 3 hours until kickoff. So we've got to make our chili, our wings done 2 ways, all of our dips, and then our charcuterie and our fruit trays. So we are gonna start prepping the chili first. Now my chili is very different from most people's chili, but that's because it's a little extra. It's like delicious. It's won actual awards several places. It won a $500 Gibson guitar at a contest once, and it is a crowd pleaser. So we're gonna start out. I've got my big Dutch oven pot here because it's impossible to make a small amount of this chili. And we're gonna start by using 1/2 pound of bacon, and we are going to chop that up into small pieces, and we're gonna cook it off in there. And then we're gonna use that bacon grease to cook up the rest of the meats that are going in this chili. We're gonna be using chuck roast, some pork butt roast, ground pork, ground beef, and some andouille sausage. So it is a very meaty chili. And then we're gonna be using 4 types of beans. So we've got our 1/2 pound of bacon in our big Dutch oven. And let me bring over our meats. We're starting with the meats first, and then we'll add in our vegetables and whatnot. We're not gonna be using all of this meat. We're just gonna be using parts of it. One thing that's nice about this chili recipe is the other cuts of the meat that I don't use. I make this really good Hungarian soup called Soup of the Balcony Outlaws. So I'm going to cut off about 1/2 of this pork butt roast, because we're gonna use 1/2 of it in there. We're gonna cube it up, and we're gonna put 1/2 of it in there, and then I'll save the other 1/2 for another recipe. There we go. But this does make a huge serving of chili. And then we're gonna use a smaller chuck roast, and I'm gonna take out the vein of fat when I'm using it. And then we're gonna use 1/2 pound of ground pork and 1/2 pound of ground chuck. And I'm gonna save the other halves for meatballs later in this week. I've been trying to work on like cutting down this recipe into smaller portions so that I'm not having like a 50-pound pot of chili that lasts forever. But there are several fun things you can do with chili if you have extra. You know, you can do chili dogs, you can make burritos, you can do nachos. So it doesn't go to waste. And I always have, when I make this, I always send like a container home with my brother, and as well as I send one off to one of my old co-workers. She loves this chili as well. But it is delicious, and it's really not that hard to make. And the beauty of it is you can make it even the day before an event, because the flavors sit and settle nicely. And I think our dog over there smells some meat. And it like, the longer it sits, the better it is. Chili tastes great the next day. It tastes great in 3 days. So that's one thing that's also nice about the big pot. I'm cutting my meat. This is my pork roast into small bite-sized pieces for our chili. So you don't want anything too big because you got to think about what you're going to be eating on your spoon.
Can you say hi to Josie real quick?
Hi, Josie. Hope you're having a good day. Hope you're excited for the Super Bowl. I'm excited for the commercials and the halftime show. That is what I look forward to every year. My team, I don't think has ever made it to a Super Bowl. Maybe they did once upon a time, but I root for the Vikings. I thought we were going to make it this year. They had such a good season, but it fell apart in the end. There's my bacon. I'm going to give it a good stir. And turn my heat down just a little. We're going to cook that off. And I'm going to chop up the rest of this pork. And I find you want the pork butt roast because it is the most tender, and it will leave for a really nice like flavor. You won't have tough meat in it. The same with the chuck roast. The chuck roast is such a tender roast cut that it cooks up really nice in it. I try to avoid like the tenderloin, the pork, like tenderloin or the pork chop, to cut those things. They're just a little bit tougher. Or with beef, like a London broil, I think it's like terrible for cooking up and roasting. There's a big piece of fat I'm going to take off. And take those off. For those of you, this is a cleaver. If you guys don't, this is an actual knife that's designed for cutting meat. And it makes it so much easier to cut through meat than a regular like chef's knife, because it has so much heft behind it. And you don't really have to do much work. It just cuts right through the meat really simply. And it's fairly easy to wield. I didn't know how much of a difference a cleaver was going to be making when I first got it for cutting up meat. I didn't think it was going to be that big of a difference. It actually makes it so much easier, because with a regular chef knife, sometimes your knife snags on the meat and won't cut all the way through because you just don't have enough heft of the blade. And that's what's like so great about the cleaver. There we go. Get this almost chopped up. And I'm going to cut off part that's a big fat chunk. I always try to take off. I don't worry too much about smaller ones, but if I have a big chunk of fat, I will cut that off, because nobody wants a really chewy fat part in their stew. That's a fatty one. So I've got my pork roast cut up into nice bite-sized pieces. I'm going to give my bacon a good stir here. There we go. And now we're going to chop up my chuck roast. My chuck roast does have, so it's nice when you cook it, it has nice fat veining, but you're going to want to cut that out for our chili, because you're not going to want a big chunk of fat in there. So I kind of just cut right along where the fat is, and then I'm just going to cut off those pieces. And it will make a huge difference in your meat. You won't have a big, fatty, chewy piece. There we go. Pull that out. I'm going to put, since my bacon has brought out enough oil of fat from it, I'm going to throw in my pork and let that start searing up. The nice thing about the chili is you don't have to wait and time the cooking of your meat, because it's all going to sit together and stew. So you don't have to worry about, oh, will I overcook it if I throw it in too early? This is it's going to stew. The longer it stews, the softer the meat's going to get. Okay. Let's cut this up into some nice pieces. And again, for those who join us later, this is a chuck roast. I find chuck roast is the best cut of meat to use for like stews and roasts, because it's just so tender, and it has a very nice marbling of fat through it, which is what makes it very tender. There we go. And then cut these up into some nice bite-sized pieces. You don't want anything too big. You could always, if you are behind on time and you didn't want to do the process of chuck, you could buy stew meat at the store and use that, just knowing that stew meat is typically a mix of different cuts of roasts. So there will be some chuck roast, but there will also probably be some round roast or a flat roast or shoulder roast in there as well, which is a slightly bit of tougher meat. But as long as you stew it long enough, those should get tender as well. There we go. So nice bite-sized pieces. And then I'm going to take out this big chunk of fat right here as well, because it will just be a chewy, goopy mess. It's not going to sear up nicely like some pork belly would. But one thing that's nice about fat is a lot of times you can just pull the meat off away from it, and it's not too terrible to cut away. There we go, that's fat. And we'll cut this side away. There we go. But you can see how much fat we're taking away. It will make for a much better stew. Although if you're doing a pot roast, you can keep that fat in there. It will reduce down and it won't, and then you'll be able to easily separate it when you cut your roast up. But for a stew, since you're chopping it up into small pieces, you do want to trim away the fat. And if you're really good about using the excess, you can actually take that fat and sear it off and stew it and make like a beef tallow from it, like some fat that you can use for cooking. It does make a delicious little, like, essentially a lard that you can use for cooking. But I don't always have the time to do that. So we are just going to trim and discard. And some nice bite-sized pieces. And I will say the pork roast and the chuck roast, I think, are everyone's favorite part, because most of the time when you get chili, you just get like a ground beef chili or a pork or something like that. Everyone says they love the big chunks of meat in this chili, but it does make it a little bit more expensive to make, but I think it's well worth the flavor profile. Okay, we've got our chuck roast in there. And we're gonna give this a good stir. And we're gonna let this, perfect. I'm gonna turn up my heat. And now we should be done with all of our meat cutting. So I'm gonna put this in the sink and give my hands a good wash. Okay. So we're gonna let these sear off, and then once all of these are cooked up, I will add my ground pork and part of my ground chuck. I'm gonna use half and half of each package, and then I'm gonna save the other half to make meatballs later in the week. But now we're gonna prep up some of our vegetables. I'm gonna saute up some vegetables for our sour cream and onion dip, and then we're gonna chop up the vegetables that are gonna go into the chili. So I've got some leftover pieces of onions that I'm gonna use as well. Try to use up what we have. For my sour cream and onion dip, I'm gonna do a mince on my onion because I want them to be very, very fine, because I don't want a big chunky onion in my dip. So I'm gonna use about half of it, and then I'm going to mince it up into a very fine mince, similar. It will be a little bit bigger than garlic, minced garlic, but it will be about that consistency. So I'm doing a really fine dice right now, and then I'm gonna go over it and mince everything. And the way I'm gonna do that is I'm just gonna kind of push my hand down on the blade and chop over it. And this is essentially going to mince it up into a slightly smaller pieces. And then we will caramelize them in a saute pan until they're nice and brown, release their natural sugars out. And then we'll put a dash of cream in to just really get those flavors out for our sour cream and onion dip. So it's very similar to your traditional Lipton sour cream and onion dip, but I like to make it a little bit more bougie with the caramelized onions, and it just gives a nice flavor to it. There we go. Get this in a nice mince. Now that we have these minced up well, I'm going to take my little nonstick pan over here, and I'm going to turn it to high, and I'm going to give it a little bit of oil. And we are going to caramelize these minced onions up. There we go. And we're just going to let them cook in that oil for about 5 to 10 minutes. I'm going to give it a nice stir so they're fully coated. There we go. And we're going to let them caramelize up. Let's give our meat a stir. So you can see it's going to be a very, very meaty chili. Get that now let's prep the vegetables that are gonna go in our chili. So we're gonna use 2 onions. Normally I would use all just yellow onions or a sweet onion, Valdalia, but I had half of a red onion left over, so I'm just gonna throw it in there. Red onions are typically better just being eaten like fresh in a salad or on burgers or in a relish. But you can add them and cook them up. They just don't have as strong of a flavor, so they won't be as potent, but for this it will work. And I'm just gonna do a small dice on these because I don't want my onions to be too overpowering, but they don't need to be finely minced. So just a small dice will suffice. Look at that, rhyming. There. So we've got these ones, and now I'm gonna chop up these 2 onions as well. With chili, the main ingredients in chili is going to be your meat, your beans, onions, and peppers, and tomatoes. Those are essentially what I use, or variations of them for it, and then spices, of course. But I like a very simple but delicious and hearty chili. Let's give this a nice stir. Lovely. Okay, now that we've gotten the meat practically cooked off here, I'm gonna add in my pork, which is ground pork. I'm gonna add in a half a pound of ground pork. I'm gonna try to break it up as I do it, so I'm not gonna have a huge chunk. And then I'm gonna add in a half a pound of ground chuck or ground beef. Any cut that you really have works. And break it up. I like to do it, wait until my meat has seared off and then do it. Otherwise, the ground beef won't get its nice like crumbly texture. You could also cook the ground beef first if you wanted to. And then last, we'll add in our andouille sausage. But I'm gonna stir this in real quick, and then I'm gonna give my hands a quick wash since I used them to get the raw meat out. But I want to just give it a quick toss. There we go. Very nice. And you can see over here our onions are starting to sizzle up in the oil. And we're going to wait until they have a nice browning caramelization on them. Very nice. And then we have our meat right here. And now we're gonna chop up our peppers. Now, if you can take a lot of heat and you like it spicy, you can use a poblano, jalapenos. But if you're like a baby of spice, you can just use good old bell peppers or sweet peppers. I cannot handle a lot of spice, nor can anyone else in our family. I think it's our Scandinavian roots that makes it to where we can't handle it. They say people with blonde and red hair cannot handle as much spice because it has to do, your spice tolerance has to do with your like your melanin in your skin. And so like people who are really fair with blonde or red hair really can't handle it. And that at least sits well with our family. Nobody can handle spice here. And we are all, my hair's a lot darker now, but I was a natural blonde. It's now a very dirty blonde. But all my kids are blondies. One of mine is a strawberry blonde. But we cannot handle it at all. It's also probably why Irish people, their food's so bland. There we go. We're gonna give these a nice simple chop up because we want them about the same sizes pieces as our onions. I'm gonna give this, it's starting to bubble nicely, so I'm gonna give it a good stir. Very nice. We're gonna cook it all up. Lovely. And let's finish up chopping up these bell peppers. I like to use the red, the yellow, and the orange. I prefer them over the green bell peppers. While green bell peppers are cheaper, they're a little bit more bitter in taste. And I find that the red, greens, and yellows have just a sweeter, nicer flavor. So I typically avoid green peppers. There we go. There's our dogs alerting everyone. Bruni, Loki. We have these big windows with a bench that they can sit up, and they just love to patrol our neighborhood, make sure nobody can walk there. But they're very fierce, but they're tiny. They weigh like 15 and 20 pounds. There we go. So I've got my peppers on a nice dicing up. Bruni, no barks. Stir our meat. You can see we don't really have any pink left, which is perfect, which is what we want. So I'm going to add in my onions and my peppers, and we're going to let those start flavoring the meat as well. Put all of those in. And we're going to add in some minced up garlic. And we're going to add in let me clean my knife, there we go. A good heaping, about a tablespoon of minced garlic, because we've got a lot of meat here. Perfect. And then I'm going to mix everything up so it can nice flavor our meat up. We're going to be adding a lot of spices in a little bit as well. But I like to start like this, and then we'll add our spices before we add our tomatoes in. The tomatoes are going to give you the kind of the liquidy broth that goes with it. But I want to have these cook up nice as well. So we've got all of those. And then the last thing we'll add in are our beans. Since they're canned beans, they don't need a lot of cooking time. I'm going to give our peppers, or not our peppers, our onions over here a stir. They're starting, you can see they've gotten a little bit yellower. So we're still waiting for them to get a nice golden brown color on them. But I'm going to stir them up. I'm going to turn my heat, I don't want them to burn. Very nice. And now let's chop up our fresh tomatoes. And I'm going to peel out where the stem is. These are vine ripe tomatoes. You could also use plum tomatoes if you wanted. I'm going to add these at the very end because tomatoes have a lot of juice in them. And we'll also be adding some canned tomatoes. So I want the onions and the peppers to kind of saute up with the meat. And then we'll add these in as well as the canned tomatoes. I'm just going to take this stem out because it has a really tough piece under it that doesn't ever cook down or anything like that. And then we're just going to kind of chop these up into some good sized dice. Not super small because they'll reduce down a lot. When you're cutting tomatoes, if your knife catches on the skin of the tomato, that means you need to sharpen your knife. Your knife has been dulled. And so you just need to get a honing steel out and then sharpen it both ways until it can cut like very easily through the tomato skin. I find I sharpen my knives about every 2-3 weeks. That's when I notice that they need to be sharpening. I do favor one knife. I favor this knife. It's just a big chef knife by Wusthof. It's my favorite. So this one I dull out much faster than some of my other knives. But like if you throw if you throw your knife in the dishwasher, which is kind of a no-no, but I know lots of people do. Bruni, I know, you see somebody running. It's kind of a no-no. It will dull your blade, but you can just sharpen it up. There we go. Brunhilde. Yes, her name is Brunhilde. We call her Bruni. It wasn't actually her original name. When we adopted her, her name was Marino's Precious Phoebe. So we had to rename her to Brunhilde. I know it's a ridiculous name, but it fits her because she's kind of like a grumpy old lady. There we go. Got our onions. They're starting to get a little translucent, which is what we want. And then we've got our our minced onions over here, you can see they've got a nice browning on them. We're gonna keep going until they're all completely browned. That means they'll be nice and tender and they'll have a sweetness to them from the naturally occurring sugars. There we go. Beautiful. So we have our diced up, and this was 4 tomatoes. We are also going to be using a big can of Rotel tomatoes, which has just, it will give a little bit of kick to our chili as well. They have, but not, again, it will be very mild. So, but before we add in our tomatoes, stir this, we're getting close on our onions. I'm gonna turn down the heat a little bit. We're gonna add our spices. And this is the key thing with my spices. You need a pack per pound of meat or beans, whatnot. So I have several packs. But when I'm buying them, I don't buy all of the same flavored chili ones. You could take the time and measure out your cumin, your chili powder, all of those good things. I just buy a variety of different chili flavor packs, and it always turns out to make a really good mix. So I have like a Tex-Mex chili, a mild chili, a Publix brand chili, Kinder's chili, a chili original, and chili O. And when I put them in here, you're gonna see they use different spices in different mix. And when I pour them out, they all have different colors, but together, they blend together and make a really nice and unique blend. And this is always what I say, this is my secret. It's not that I measure out certain spices and do it. I use these packs, but I use different brands of them, and then I make sure I have like a pack per pound of meat, and that way everything's gonna have a nice flavor. So here's the chili O. It has like a nice lighter color, and we'll use the next one. You can see it has a completely different color, meaning completely different ratio. And I always buy the mild ones. You could get the spicy ones if you like spice. But again, we love it mild, so we do this. This one, you can see it's more red. It probably has a lot more paprika in it than some of the other ones. And there we go. And this one. And one more, and we will have our mix. And you can get these, I feel like it's in the powdered gravy or sauce sections. This one you can tell has a lot more chili powder in it because it has that deep red on it. But together I find that they make like the perfect blend. Okay, let's get these. We've got a nice caramelization right here on our onions. This is exactly what I wanted. So I'm gonna turn this off. And then what I'm going to do to this is we're going to add a bit of cream. The cream will help take some of that caramelized onion flavor to it and bring it out. It's going to be about, I would say, maybe 1.5 tablespoons. And we're going to make it, it's going to be a delicious kind of oniony paste, which we will add to our sour cream. But it will flavor it nicely. And it will just be very lovely. And then we're gonna be also using some Lipton's onion or French onion soup mix. So the heat is turned off and it's just gonna simmer in there and it's gonna help flavor it. Now I'm gonna get a nice big spoon and I'm gonna stir my seasonings into my meat. I like to make sure I have my seasonings into my meat before I add my tomatoes because I want them to have all the lovely tender flavors of the chili. And of course you could always make your own chili seasonings at home if you wanted to. You know, it just uses like cumin, chili powder, the paprika, garlic. There's a whole bunch of different things. I just find it's a little bit easier and it works well as using the different packs, but you've got to use multiple different brands because they all add just a different flavor to come together to be beautiful. So now we've got this nice, thick, well-seasoned meat. I'm going to turn my heat down to a 4, which is kind of a medium-low. And here you can see I've got my cream has thickened up with the onions. And it's just going to be a very lovely flavored onion mix that will like mix into our sour cream to make our yummy sour cream and onion dip in just a bit. There we go. Beautiful. So now I'm gonna see, I know it's kind of steamy, but it's a very thick paste on it. This is where we're going to add our tomatoes and our big can of tomatoes, all the juices, and it's gonna help thin it out just a little bit, but not much. But that way it has, everything has just a really great
You got a question, do you recommend Hexclad?
Oh yes, I absolutely love Hexclad. I switched to that about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, and I have yet to scrape any of my Hexclad pans, which I could not say is the truth about my other nonstick pans that I've had in the past. They, so far, they clean up easily. They have been indestructible. I actually have, I have a set or two in my store you guys can look at. They have a good deal on them, which makes them a bit cheaper than from buying them at Hexclad. But they are expensive, but they are worth the money. Again, I've had mine for 2 years, and I have yet to scratch it or ruin it or do anything. So I do recommend them. I was really, at the time when I bought them, I was really unsure about getting them because I've really kind of stuck with like the Cuisinart ones, the non-stick Teflon pans from Cuisinart. But after those would last about 1 year, brony, and then they would like scratch or scrape. Once the Teflon pan gets scratched up, they're considered toxic. But these don't actually use Teflon in it, and so far they've not scratched, but they wouldn't be toxic like a Teflon pan did if they scratched it. But even like I can saute stuff on it and it doesn't get stuck to it. Like they're really easy to clean up afterwards. Okay, so I've got my big thing of tomatoes, or Rotel tomatoes, and my 4 chopped up tomatoes. And we're gonna let those stew and simmer. And next we have our beans. My trick with the beans is I use a mixture of beans. Traditional chili just has kidney beans and pinto beans. I love to add in some black beans and Great Northern. They're very tender and a bit more mild than, say, the kidney beans. Kidney beans, I think, have a stronger flavor. But they add a nice color to the chili and a good flavor and texture. But when using canned beans, you got to remember to rinse them. You don't just open up a pack of beans and put them in because they're full of really soupy, starchy water. That's just the natural starches, as you can see if you look in there. It's very gelatinous. That's the natural starches that come from the beans as they sit. So I'm going to open these all up, and then I'm going to pour them into my colander over the sink and give them a good rinse. You could also use dried beans if you want, but that takes you got to let those soak overnight, and you have to then cook them. And so I don't find that dried beans ever get to a really nice texture. A lot of times I find that they still remain a tough skin on them. So I always use canned. But I'm going to bring these guys over here. And we will pour them in, and I will give them a quick rinse. So, got my pinto beans, kidney beans, black beans, and Great Northern beans. I'm going to give it a good shake because I don't want any of the extra water to go into our chili. Boom, 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 boom. And quick. And then we're going to pour these in. But you see how we have just a lovely variety of color here? And you can also add in dark kidney beans, but I'm not a big fan of dark red kidney beans. I prefer the light ones. I think the dark ones have the stronger flavor and a slightly tougher skin. So we're gonna stir and we're gonna mix these all the way up. And guess what? Now and then we gotta add in our andouille sausage. You can't forget about this. I add this, it's already cooked, so I always add it at the very end. This andouille sausage, if you've never had it, it's kind of like it's a Cajun sausage, so it has a spice to it. It's definitely a bit spicy. But I find that it's mild enough for our family, but it adds a nice thing, and I like it better than chorizo, which is a traditional Spanish like spicy sausage. But I find chorizo is very spicy, and I can't handle it because it has like chili pepper oil in it. So chorizo or andouille is my like go-to to have kind of a similar flavor profile, but not as spicy. So we've got this. Beautiful, and you can see these lovely big chunks of meat in there. That's what everyone really loves about it. And then we're gonna add, I'm gonna slice up the andouille and use it in here. And then I always just like to cut off the, you know, where they twist the casing. I always cut those off because I think they taste a little chewy sometimes. And then when I'm gonna cut it, I like to cut it at a side kind of angle. I think it just looks a little bit nicer. Otherwise it kind of looks like a big hot dog. So I'm just gonna cut it around in it's gonna be kind of like a teardrop shape, but I find that it just looks a little more bougie that way. But again, for those of you who've never had it, it's a Cajun flavored sausage, and this one's a smoked sausage, so it definitely has that like kind of summer sausage undertones to it. But it's lovely, and it works really well in the chili because those flavor profiles just kind of all kind of blend well together. And then we're gonna put this in here and we'll stir it up. And then we just let our chili simmer on low until we're ready to have it for dinner tonight. Which is so nice about it because it can simmer on low all day if you want. These flavors will just meld together more and more. I find chili tastes great the next day. And this, since it's such a meaty chili, we also use it for nachos and to make little burritos out of it as well. It's just a great way to use your extra chili in a non-chili way, I guess. There we go. Stir all of it up. Beautiful. And now I'm gonna just put, and we're gonna let it simmer. And when we eat it tonight, we'll top it off with sour cream, green onions, cheddar cheese, and fresh cilantro in your bowl with it, and it's like delicious. But now we have lots of other things to make, so we will move on. I'm gonna give my cutting board and my knife a quick wash. And we're gonna do, I think we'll make our French onion dip because we need it to sit in the refrigerator and chill up. And you want those flavors to blend. Then I think we'll do our guacamole, and we also have our wings that we need to get done. And then our traditional queso and rotel cheese dip. So we have lots of left to do, but I hope you guys are having fun and enjoying us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That really helps us get our videos out. Let's see, we need a bowl. Got it. For our things. And I put it around here. I've got to find it now. Let's see. I'm looking for my sour cream and onion dip thing. I'll get my sour cream out of the fridge. And this one you use fresh sour cream. I'm gonna put my chili down, give it a good stir. And here are our caramelized onions that we used. Right there. Okay, and let's see. I think I have, there it is, it's in my pantry. So I've got my French onion Lipton's. I know this is totally like bougie 90s, but that is what we are doing here, and it makes a big difference. So you're gonna use about a cup of sour cream. So this is actually like a little over 2 cups or 2.5 cups. We're not using all of it. And we're gonna use a French onion pack and our mix. And you mix it all together and then you just let it sit and chill. It really is super easy to do. So, if you've never made this, this is the classic French onion dip that you would have at a birthday party in the 90s or whatnot. So I'm gonna put in about a cup of sour cream. I'm gonna put it right into my pan right here because it'll be easier to mix in here. So a cup of sour cream into our caramelized onions with cream. And then we're going to add in 1 packet of the Lipton's Secret Onion Soup Mix. And we're gonna mix it all together. And then we can just pop it back in the fridge and we'll keep it until we're ready later. The trick is you do wanna make this a little bit before you before you're ready to serve it, because the longer it sits, the French onion can like marinate in the sour cream. It just gives it a more flavorful. So, and that's also, I like to add the caramelized onions there because I think it just gives it a bit more onion flavor. There we go. Lovely. And also it will allow I guess the Lipton's has dehydrated onions. The longer it sits will allow those to rehydrate some as well. So we have it all mixed up beautiful right here. And I'm just gonna scoop it into this because this is what we're gonna be using for our dips later. We're gonna be making guacamole, and then I had some leftover corn salsa from the other night when we did flautas or taquitos. So we're gonna be using that. So here is our French onion dip. It makes like a perfect Super Bowl serving size. And I'm going to put it in the fridge to chill up. So I'm gonna use a little press and seal. And then we're gonna make our next dip for tonight. But before we do that, let's work on the sauce for our La Brea tar pits, which needs to simmer and reduce. So for the La Brea tar pits wings.
Yeah, I was going to say, clarify it's chicken wings.
Yes, it is, I will say. So if you know what the La Brea tar pits, they're literally tar pits in California where they found dinosaur bones. So this is the La Brea tar pit wings. It's actually a recipe from Gourmet magazine, like from the early 2000s. But essentially you cook soy sauce, red wine, and fresh ginger and sugar, and you reduce it down, and then you're gonna cook the wings in it, and it gets into a really sticky black kind of paste that looks like tar. But it's more of like a teriyaki red wine things, but they're delicious. They're a favorite. I make them every Super Bowl. And so we're gonna do that. We're gonna start by measuring out our ingredients, and we'll do a little reduction. So I need sugar for this, and I'm gonna use some ginger paste. You could also use dried ginger. You only need about 1/4 a teaspoon of dried ginger if you use that. Okay, we're gonna use 1/2 cup of red wine, a hearty red wine if you have it. We're using mine. I'm not a big wine drinker, and like 2 years ago I got a wine advent calendar for Christmas. I'm still going through it. And I mainly only use it for cooking. So we've got this tiny cute little bottle from there. I also say I'm terrible at taking out corks. Most of the time I break the cork in there. I just don't know. Just wasn't meant to be. There we did it. So we're gonna use 1/2 cup of red wine and a cup of soy sauce. So I've got a little bit left, and then I'm gonna use some more. Let me get a measuring cup for it. And so 1/2 cup of red wine. I'll put it in here. And then we're gonna use 1 whole cup of soy sauce. So this is where the kind of the salty flavor is gonna come from these. and really season it. Nice. Let's see. And I'm actually gonna just take, if I can pop this out, there we go. That way it will pour faster. And 1 whole cup of soy sauce. You could use the reduced sodium if you wanted to. There's plenty of salt in that as well to add a very salty flavor. So pop that back on. And then if you're using dried ginger, you need about 1/4 of a teaspoon. I'm using this minced ginger, so you can use a little bit more. I'm gonna use about a teaspoon, so I'm just gonna give a good squeeze. And then we're gonna add in about a cup of sugar. And we're gonna cook it and kind of reduce it until we don't want to heat it too long because we don't want it to turn to candy. We're gonna boil it until all the sugar has kind of dissolved. And then what we'll do is we'll coat the wings on it and we pop those in the oven and they are gonna cook at 350. You cook them for about 30 minutes and then you flip them over and then you finish them off for a final 30 minutes. Super easy. But when you're done with it, the sauce is like kind of turned to a nice caramely sticky mess at the bottom of your pan, which makes for just really delicious wings. So we're gonna get that, let me stir that real quick. Very nice. Give it a good stir. That way it can start dissolving. And then I'm gonna turn on my oven to 350 degrees. Because we'll have them cook in there, but before I bake them, I want to bake off our cookies that we made last night. So let me start my oven. Here we go. That's going to preheat. And we have our chili. Because I have it cooking on low heat, I'm just going to periodically stir it because I don't want it to burn at the bottom, but it's on just a low simmer. And that's the nice thing about using a Dutch oven. They're made out of cast iron and has enamel coating. They retain the heat well, so they'll cook nice and slow. Beautiful. So I have a nice stir there. Okay, let's make our guacamole. So let me get a bowl for the guacamole. We're gonna do just a simple guacamole today that's just gonna use lime juice, garlic, salt, and avocados. Sometimes I do a table guacamole, which has like chopped up onions, peppers, and tomatoes. But today we are just going to do a simple plain guacamole. My kids love plain guacamole the most, but they will tolerate a fancier one. So I'm gonna start with my avocados. I'm hoping they're all good. But I got them at the beginning of the week. This is a nice one. And you know how avocados are. They're ripe for about 30 seconds before they go bad. That one's good. My trick is I try to ripen them out on the counter and then I pop them in the fridge. This one's has some usable, but some of it's not great. It's like playing Russian roulette. You never know with your avocados whether they're gonna be good or bad. Okay, these two are decent. Okay, we're gonna get a spoon out, or a fork. So, look at this, look at this. You ever get one and you feel like you've been cheated because you have the world's largest avocado pit in here? I mean, this, I feel like I should get my money back. I want them to have a tiny one like this. Look at the size disparity between these two avocado pits. See, I got like, and our avocados already cost an arm and a leg. You know, you pay almost, sometimes, well, I find the Superbowl, they make them a little bit cheaper because they know everyone's gonna have them. But, you know, sometimes they're like $1.50 a piece. Or you get like 4 for $5, and I'm like, that's not a deal. They're expensive, but delicious. And you can't have guacamole without them. Okay, I just like to peel off my skins. I mean, you can scoop them out with a spoon if you want to, but I find if your avocados are ready, they'll peel right off. There we go. Although I will say store-bought avocados here in America are just not as good as like the freshies you can get from like the markets in like Spain or Mexico. They just taste so much better. Yeah, see, this one's not too good. Let me use part of it. So growing up, my family had a house in Spain that was my grandparents. They had retired there. And right next to their house was an avocado farm.
They still have it?
Well, yes, they still have it. They're still alive. They still have it. I just haven't gone since I was in like my teenage years. It's been a while since I've gone there. So they still have it. It's on the Costa de Maya, or Costa del Sol. And but right next to their house was an avocado farm, and the neighbors were wonderful. And they always said, if you have an avocado that's fallen on the ground, you can pick it and you can keep it. So whenever I was there, my grandparents would send me out to get some avocados from the ground, and I would search for them. But they were the best avocados ever because they were tree ripe. They were so fresh versus the ones that you get now are picked before they're ripe, and they just have a completely different texture and flavor from ones that are truly fresh. I'm just getting out some of the brown parts because, like I said, avocados go bad so fast. Okay, so we got our avocados in here, and then we are gonna put in some fresh lime juice. You've gotta use real lime. You can't use that like true lime stuff. It has to be real lime juice. And we're gonna squeeze it all in. The lime juice, not only will it give it the nice vibrant flavor that you want, but it's also gonna help keep your avocados from going brown. So the lemon juice or the lime juice prevents the oxidation, I can't even speak today, from occurring. It's just similar like if you put lemon juice on apples, it prevents them from browning. It's the same concept. So I'm just really getting all in there. And then let's do my next one. And you always want to add more lime juice than you think because it really is a key point. It has to be fresh. You can't use that stuff in the plastic bottle. Just has a completely different flavor. There we go. And so we're going to use one juice from a lime and then garlic salt. Garlic salt will have the garlic flavor to it and the salty part, and it just makes the perfect combination. So you're gonna want a lot because avocados have no flavor. There we go. And I find garlic salt doesn't have as much of a salty punch as table salt or regular salt because it's been rehydrated. It's like dehydrated with like garlic juice, so it's not quite as salty. There we go. And I'm just taking my fork and I'm mashing through. I actually do have a special guacamole or avocado masher thing, and it's in like a volcanic, I want to say it's like a volcanic bowl made out of volcanic rock, and it has like the pestle, the mortar. It's like a giant mortar and pestle, but it's so hard to clean because it's a very porous bowl. So I never use it, but I actually got it in Mexico and I brought it back. And I just have never used it because it's such a pain to clean. But it's still sitting in my garage. One day, there we go. So I've mashed it up. And now I'm just gonna taste. Perfect, don't need any more salt. And then the trick is, I'm gonna put this in the fridge to chill, but you wanna cover it with some saran wrap or press and seal. But when you do it, you wanna push the press and seal all the way down, or the saran wrap all the way down on the avocado, because you don't wanna leave any air in there. That air will cause it to oxidize and turn brown, even with the lime juice. So simply push it all the way down. Same thing, if I have extra guacamole, I will put it in a container and then I'll put saran wrap over, push it down, and then put the lid on. This just prevents it from going brown because there's no oxygen in there to start the oxidization process. So we have that, and now we're gonna chill it in the fridge because you want your guacamole to be nice and cold. I'll have here with my other dips.
And you got a tip that you're supposed to season the mortar and pestle to get it prepared to use. So when you get around to it in the next decade, we can we'll have to look that up. But
Yeah.
I'll tell you guys, half of our garage are just shelves and shelves of cooking utensils and tools.
Oh yes, that I might use once a year, but I will never get rid of ever. It is one of my. I told my husband, I said we need to build a new shelving system because it has gotten to be so. You know what, I'm just gonna show you how bad it is. It's really like, let me do it seriously. It's so overflowing with kitchen supplies that it just goes over here. So when I tell you, I say I have a lot of extra kitchen cooking stuff, it is like mountains of cooking supplies. Every little gadget known to man. And so I'm like, oh, we just have to, I have to build a new system. I need a butler's pantry.
As well as every cabinet full.
Every cabinet. I have tons of it. I've collected it through ages. But those are things I rarely use, which is why they go out in the garage. The things that I do use are kept inside, so I don't.
You got someone saying, same with them, it's an addiction. It is a problem.
It is. And you always are like, ooh, I need this and I need that. And you're like, but I could easily have done that in a regular pot. Like I have a fish pan for roasting fish, which I have never done. I've never roasted a whole fish, but I have an all-clad fancy fish pan because it was really cool looking and I needed it. Okay, giving our things a little stir. Now, right over here, we have our soy sauce and our red wine and sugar. And it's starting, you see it's starting to foam. That means we are done because if I were to leave this on the heat, it would, just like if you're making homemade candy, it's gonna bubble up and over. So you don't want it to, we don't want it to get too hot that the candy starts forming like candy crystals. So let me get our chicken. Actually, we'll sit there because I need to bake my cookies before I put the chicken and stuff in the oven. So let me move this out of the way. If you were with us last night, late last night, I prepped our cookies for the game today.
Just want to give a rundown of Aunt Aggie's.
So yes, they're Aunt Aggie's. They are a mix between a sugar cookie and a butter cookie. And we mixed them together last night. It was like 4 sticks of butter, 3 cups of sugar, 6 egg yolks, 4 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, and 2 teaspoons of cream of tartar. Super simple, easy ingredients. Mix them together, and then I dyed them for the Eagles colors. You'll see them in just a second. I gotta clean it up so I can cut them. And you put them in the freezer, and you let them cool until they're hard, and then we'll chop them, and we'll bake them real quick. So let me wipe this off real quick, because I don't want my cookies to taste like guacamole. And I'm gonna get out another cutting board.
And you don't want to make a mistake like the pineapple the other day.
Oh yes, I accidentally didn't wash my cutting board really clean after cutting onions, and then I cut my pineapple, and my pineapple had a little onion taste to it.
A lot of onion taste.
Oh, you guys just complain. I find my family complains no matter what. Okay, let's pull these guys out of the freezer. So I've got 2 logs of it.
But your recipe made 4.
Well, yes, it made 4. I just make them. They're great to keep in the freezer. They'll last in the freezer for like 3 months. And you can just pop them. They cook in like 8 minutes in the oven at 350 or 7 minutes. So they cook really fast. Let me get a knife and we're going to cut them up and prep them. I made them white and dark green for Eagles and red and yellow for the Chiefs. We do not have a favorite here. Our team, unfortunately, did not make it to the Super Bowl. Our teams never make it to the Super Bowl. Just got a piece of cake. I've got a lot of cooking stuff in my oven. So let me I'm getting my really big baking sheets out, which are at the very bottom. So these are a 1.5 sheet baking sheets. So they're bigger than your standardized ones, but these cookies are small, but they make a lot. And so I like to have a big baking sheet. And then I'm gonna put down parchment paper. If you haven't made the switch to parchment paper for baking, do it. You'll thank me later. It's just so much easier and works so much better than trying to grease your cookie sheet. They never stick and they always come off super easy. So I have these wrapped up in press and seal. keeps them. And this is my beautiful dough. It's just a big log. Always cut off. My kids typically will just eat the dough cold. But I always cut off the little last bit because it doesn't ever bake up as nice. And then we're just going to press through. And they're essentially like cut, they have to be frozen, but you cut them and then we'll lay them out on our baking sheet. They don't expand, they don't get super huge. So like 4 of these cookies equal like a traditional like cookie size. And
they're everyone's favorites, and we have the full video available.
Yes.
And posted already.
These are everyone's. This is one cookie that everyone in my family absolutely loves, and they love the dough. They'll eat the dough frozen. They'll eat the dough right when I make it. But it's just such a simple cookie. And it's actually from, like, the recipe is from a family member, Aunt Aggie, from the 1800s. So it is over 150 years old. So it's been, I guess it's been a hit and a staple in the Jensen household for a very long time. And you can see you can bake a lot. You don't need a lot of room because these don't spread out. And that's because it has cream of tartar in it, which is a thickening agent. You might also, if you don't know what cream of tartar is, it also goes by alum, is another name for it. But it's just, it's like a white powder similar to like baking soda or baking powder, but it's essentially a thickening agent that's been around for ages. If you ever make homemade Play-Doh, I use cream of tartar in homemade Play-Doh as well, because it helps keep the dough together. And they're really not hard to cut through when they're frozen. You see, I'm just using a simple chef's knife and then just pressing over. You don't have to be super uniform. You just try to eyeball it and try to get all of them kind of cut the same size. There we go. So we're about to have our Chiefs tray done. And the beauty of it is they bake in 7 minutes. You don't want to overbake them, because if you overbake them, they'll get like crunchy, super crunchy. These ones, when you take them out of the oven, they're soft for about 30 minutes, and then they get to a nice crisp on it. So they do crisp up, but my kids love to eat them 5 minutes after they come out of the oven. That's the best time. But they also last really well for a long time.
To answer your question, JJ, yeah, I'm holding the phone.
Yeah, he's my cameraman. He holds it there. I think it's just, it works easier. I'm not a person who's going to mess around with a phone stand.
You got a question? You seem very knowledgeable. Have you taken any classes?
No, I haven't taken any classes. I just have read lots of books and magazines. I've always been into cooking since I was a young age. So I've been doing it for a long time. I mean, I just turned 37 like a week ago. But I've been cooking since I was like 13. So that's like 20, that's a long time.
Well, cooking daily. At 13, you're cooking dinner every day.
Yeah. I took over cooking the family dinner when I was a kid. It was my chore and a good way for me to earn money. And so I started cooking then and making family dinners. And I've just loved it. I had subscription to Fine Cooking and Gourmet. I watched Top Chef, Master Chef. I've read a bunch of cookbooks or technique books like gastronomy, which is the science behind special cooking.
And tons of trial and error.
Yes, trial and error.
Trying to flip a what egg the other day?
There's things I can't do. I can't flip a fried egg for the love of me. That skill is not something I'm good at. And it is macaroons. I'm not very good at making macaroons. My husband, I got a whole kit a couple years ago, and I was like, I'm gonna make macaroons. But I was gone, I was working or doing something, and my husband, who, I'm gonna preface this, cannot cook or bake, decided, how hard can this be? And he followed the directions, and he made perfect macaroons, absolutely perfect macaroons the first time. And this guy can't even bake. He can't even cook chicken.
And the second time.
And the second time. The third time it didn't work out for you, so finally. But he made perfect. He had the foot on the macaroons, the crisp. He made everything absolutely perfect. And I thought he went out to the store and bought some and just tried. Nope, he made them perfectly. I made them. They didn't turn out. So I've made them once that turned out half decent, but it's one of those things where I just haven't quite found the knack of, and they're very involved, so I haven't practiced it a lot.
You got a question? What flavor are the cookies?
They are a mix between a butter and a sugar cookie. So the coloring is just the food coloring to dye it for the Eagles, and then the red and yellow ones are for the Chiefs. But they are essentially sweeter than a butter cookie, not as sweet as a sugar cookie. So they're like a hybrid, but they're very delicious. The flavor comes because there's very few ingredients in it. It is literally butter, sugar, egg yolks, flour, baking soda, and cream of tartar. So it's a very simple, a sweet butter cookie is the best.
Available?
We have it listed in our videos. We've said it there, but I'm planning to make some recipe cards, so we'll put it there. But just to lay it out really quickly, if you're gonna make a big batch like I do, which makes 4 big logs, it is 4 sticks of butter, 3 cups of sugar, granulated white sugar, and you cream those together. Then you add in 6 egg yolks, just the yolks. Cream those together. Then you add in 2 teaspoons of baking soda, 2 teaspoons of cream of tartar, and you cream those up together. And then you're gonna add in 4 cups of flour, cream them together, and then you can add in your food coloring, and then you just put them out into logs like we had, and then you freeze them for 24 hours. And then they'll be ready to cut. And then you bake them at 350 for 7 minutes. Super easy. And we'll also post this video online, but we made them last night, so we should have a video posted.
The full video is posted, yep.
I'm gonna pop these. My oven is preheated to 350 degrees. Let me just move. I had a roast in there the other day, so I gotta move up my baking sheet. Put my top one in, and then we're gonna put in our red ones, and we're gonna bake them for 7 minutes. My bottom tray will need to bake like a minute longer afterwards, because anything that's on the bottom typically needs about a minute or 2 more.
JJ says the same thing that you say. Yeah, she knows that you can't just cover them instead, but she still tries every time, just in case. One day she might get it. But he says, yeah, just cover them, you know, with the lid.
Yeah. Oh, I know, the steamed one. Because I always do mine eggs over easy. That's always just what I've had. And I know they never turn out. And I can do it the steamed way. And then with a nonstick, you can slide them off. But I love that crispy edge that you get on an over easy egg.
And you'll never learn to do it if you stop trying.
I know. Okay, what we did, our cookies, they're baking. I have the timer set. I have my board over here to keep me on track of all the things that I need to do. So we've got the sauce, so we'll work on that. We still have the charcuterie to make, the rotel and queso. We did that, our fruit tray, so we've got lots to do. But we're doing really great timing here. Okay, I'm gonna stir my chili. And now, because I have it cooking on low simmering, because you want those things, but you always want to make sure you stir, because if you leave it and you don't tend to, it can burn at the bottom, which will then get you a burnt taste in your chili, which you don't want. Okay, we need baking trays. This is going to be for our La Brea tar pit wings, and then a really basic, and I tell you basic, actually I'm going to use this one, Lowry seasoning salt wings. They're just a favorite. It's a recipe that came from my stepfather, and they're so basic and plain, but they're a favorite. They're just like a salty seasoned wing. Okay, we've got our 2 dishes here. Let me get my wings. I've got wings and I've got drumettes. A drumette is like a smaller drumstick. So we'll do half and half because half of them, wings are kind of hard to eat if you notice. But we've got a big pack of wings, so I'm gonna put half of them on one tray because they're gonna be one type, and the other half on the other one. And then we're gonna do our drumettes as well. There we go. I made sure to buy my wings earlier in the week because one year, I didn't wait, because I typically go my shopping like the day of or the day before the Super Bowl. One week, all the wings were sold out. So I grabbed these earlier in the week just so I would have them. Because what's the Super Bowl without wings? And then drumettes, which are really just the drumstick part of the wings, but they're easier to eat. So we'll have a big, put these here. Spread them out.
You gotta ask if you wash the chicken and scrub it.
I do not wash and scrub the chicken. I know that is like a personal preference, and I feel like there's a very divided line. There are people who wash and scrub it and the people who don't. I've heard you don't need to, and it can also lead to like cross-contamination of getting chicken stuff on things that you didn't intentionally mean to. I just find it's easier to just put it in here. We're going to be baking it at such a high temperature that it will kill any of your diseases or like E. coli.
Yeah, I mean, you don't wash a steak. You know.
Yeah, I know. That's why I sit there and I'm like, you don't typically wash meat when you're preparing it. But I think it's just some people do it and they have strong opinions about it, and that I feel like it's personal preference. If you want to do it, you can. To me, it's just an extra step, and I'm all about cutting out those extra steps. Okay, so we have this here. I'm going to wash my hands since I've been touching them.
There's a whole argument right now, people. Some people say you have to do it, but you honestly, you don't have to. If you want to do it, like my wife said, it's personal preference, but it's definitely not a requirement.
Yes. My thing is just make sure you cook your chicken
Yes.
all the way through. That's the most important. Undercooked chicken, whether you washed it or not, can make you sick. Okay, so we're going to have our wings done two ways. We're going to have the La Brea tar pit wings and then the Lowry seasoning. So this is that sauce. I'm going to get a ladle because that's not scooping. Here is a ladle, for those of you who don't know what a ladle is. I feel like if everyone knows one because they know what the Big Dipper is. There we go. And I'm just going to ladle this over all of our chicken pieces. And what we're going to do is you're going to bake it for 30 minutes. And then you flip them and you bake it for another 30 minutes. And it's going to allow for the sauce to reduce down and turn into a nice sticky sauce. It's going to resemble.
Yeah, the question, do you ever use a brush for this?
Not really, because it's such a runny, it's very soupy that a brush wouldn't really do anything for it. You really need to pour it over. And then that's kind of the reason why you flip it halfway through, is then it will get sticky and coat and flavor it. If you have a thicker seasoning, yes, you would brush it on, but this is still very thin that you don't need to brush it on.
That's a good point. Someone says they line their pans with foil for the easy cleanup.
I do. What I normally do is get the just those throwaway pans, like the aluminum ones. I forgot to grab them. I've done the aluminum foil, but sometimes I've had it happen with this one where the liquid goes underneath the foil, and that's all the stuff you want, the juicy, great stuff, because the aluminum foil doesn't completely cover my trays. So yes, I normally buy the throwaway trays. That is so much easier, but I forgot today. So we're doing them without, and then I'm going to be cooking them in my oven over there, and you're not supposed to use aluminum foil in it because it's connected to the microwave. And if you run the microwave, which I might not, I don't know if I'm going to run it or not, but it could cause it to spark, and we don't want a fire. Okay, let me give this a stir, and then I'm gonna get the Lowry seasoning salt, and we're gonna put that over this. Where? Right here. Oh, and guess what? Before we do that, my oven is beeping. Our cookies are ready to come out. That's why it's important to set your timer, because time goes fast when you're cooking. Okay, I'm gonna get this and I'm gonna move some of this over. It's for our fruit tray. Don't fall. Okay. So our top tray is ready. They've puffed up. You can see in the light, you can kind of see a crinkle on it. And I'm gonna put this right here. You don't wanna try to take them off yet. They need to sit, because if you try, they'll fall apart. And then I'm gonna move my second tray up, and we're gonna cook that for about a minute longer or two. Let's see, timer. We're gonna do 1:30 minutes, because the bottom tray, when you have this on, the direct heat can't get to it, and so it doesn't cook as well, so it needs about a bit more. Where did I put my Lowry seasoning salt? Right here. We can salt these up. So this is what I'm gonna tell you. This is like such a simple, easy. You're just gonna sprinkle them with this, and you're gonna give it a little toss with some olive oil. So I'm gonna grab my olive oil spray, because I find it works better than tossing. So this is like, it's like a pump spray olive oil. It works great. But I'm just gonna spray, and this will help it have a nice crispy chicken. You could also toss it in olive oil if you wanted to, but this works well. And then you're just gonna season it with this. And this, if you've never used it before, it has, let me see, paprika, onion, garlic. So it just has, and salt. So it has just a nice salty flavor, but these are basic, simple, but everyone's favorite. And you're just gonna sprinkle it over, and the chicken wings will just crisp up, and they'll have a nice salty, crispy thing on it. There we go. Beautiful. You don't want to over salt them though. I one time went a little heavy and they were so salty. But that is basically it. And then you're gonna cook these in the oven. So they'll cook about the same time. You just don't need to flip these. But let's pop those cookies out. And then we can get those wings in the oven. I hear you, I hear you. This oven just beeps incessantly. I'm gonna just pop off my sourdough, and we can put the tray right on here. Let's move the butter. We don't need our butter to melt. Okay. And now these have puffed up nicely. You can see some of them have a nice crinkle on them. But now we have our Eagles versus Chiefs cookies. And our nice vibrant colors. We'll see which ones go first. My boys are rooting for the Eagles. I'm rooting for either team to win, as long as it's a good win. So we're gonna pop these. I'm gonna put these on my bottom rack. I'm gonna put my other ones on the top rack of it. So, and then we'll rotate halfway through. So just at 350. And we're gonna grab our next tray, and you're gonna bake them for about an hour. With the La Brea Tar Pit wings, you are going to flip them halfway through. And that is just because they'll bake in that seasoning, and it will make a nice thick tarry gel. Pop these in here. You gotta be careful so you don't spill it. Boom. I'm gonna just set my timer for 30 minutes so I remember to flip them. Very important. Because otherwise then you'll have one side will be seasoned and the other side won't be. Okay. Now let me look at my board. I'm gonna just check off over here. I like to have my checklist of, so we've got our chili made, we've got these in the oven, we've got our Lowry's wings done, we've got our guacamole done, we've got our sour cream. So now we've got rotel pesto. I'm gonna make that later, closer. We gotta prep our charcuterie, and we gotta make our fruit tray and our dessert board. Okay, we're gonna do the fruit, because that requires a bit of prep. I have, we kind of make our spread to be the whole, like this is gonna be our snacks and dinner and everything. Let me wash my board too. Don't want any onion flavor to get in like I did last time. And we've got 2 melons that we're gonna have cut up. We're gonna use some of the melon for our fruit tray, and then I also just prep it for the following for the week. And I had to get honeydew because it's green. I was like, ooh, should I do like a green themed for the Eagles and then like a red and yellow themed for the Chiefs? But I find buying your melons is so much cheaper than paying for it to be cut up at the store. It's a lovely honeydew. And we've got our cantaloupe. It actually doesn't take too much time to cut them up and prep them. But it saves you, like, I would say if I were to buy this in the store, this melon cost me $4, but if I were to buy it, this amount chopped up, that would easily be like $20. It's such a ripoff for them to cut your fruit up. And I always have a Tupperware container and I'll cut it up and put it in there. But I find, like, same with the pineapple. I'm gonna scoop out the seeds into my trash. But they way overcharge you, and sometimes you don't even get like good pineapple or fresh. It will be mealy or not great. So I always like to prep my fruit, and it saves me a lot of money. And I have 5 kids, and we eat a lot of fresh fruit here. So anything that can save, it's like the difference between spending, $40 on fresh fruit for the week or $150. And you want to make sure you get all the seeds out because seeds are not good. And I was to say, I got raspberries and strawberries as well. And I have some pineapple and some kiwis. So we can have green and we can have red and yellow. And then we'll throw in some cantaloupe because you know what? It's kind of got like a goldish color for like the Chiefs. So the way I just do it is I'm just gonna slice it down into pieces and then I will chop it. Again, it's not as hard as you think. I just kind of slice it through like this and then I will take my knife and run it along the skin. And comes off just perfect. And it's really not that hard. And once you get used to, like, if you're uncomfortable using the knife, that just comes with practice, with time. One thing that's nice is when you chop it first like this, your thing becomes flat. So it's not like you're having to curve your blade. So it's actually not as hard. If you try to slice without making the slots down the middle, then you have to curve your blade while you're chopping, which is you have to be a bit more skilled at. Get this chopped up. Then we'll assemble our fruit tray. And we won't be using all of this, but it's good to keep it for the week. Because I serve fresh fruit with all of our dinner every night, or for my kids who are home with me during the day, my little ones, they get it at breakfast and lunch. I'm a big proponent of fresh fruit. I try to avoid, we'll do applesauce pouches, but I try to avoid the canned fruit because the kids just learn to like the sugar and the sweetness out of it. And we should save our sweetness for desserts and stuff like that, not for our fruit that are already naturally sweet. And we'll chop here. But you see how this, yes, it takes a little bit more time than getting ones from the store, but how quickly it goes. This doesn't take long. And I always think I'd much rather spend the $15 that I saved doing it myself on Starbucks. husband says I have an unhealthy addiction to Starbucks. And somehow I have turned that addiction to my teenage daughter as well. It's just so good. There we go. Also, you know, one thing that's nice about melons at the store, you don't really pay by pound, you pay by melon. So I'm always like, give me the biggest melon there is. I'm gonna get the bang for my buck. And then also when you're buying melons, like watermelon, you just, if you're not used to like picking it out, you want to pick out one that has a nice vibrant green and has no white spots. White spots means that they're not going to be sweet. If it has a yellow spot, that means it will be sweet, so that's fine. But white just means it's doesn't have a lot of naturally occurring sugar in it. And then you want to also avoid ones that have flat spots, because that means that they grew rapidly during a rain, like a rainfall, and they won't be as good either. There we go. We've got our big here. We're almost done with that, and then we'll chop up. This one I actually... And you know, one thing... I'm going to steal a piece. It's a good honeydew. When I would visit my grandparents in Spain, one dish that you'd always get at a restaurant there was honeydew melon, or occasionally cantaloupe, with prosciutto. So they would put strips of prosciutto over it. And in Spanish, they would call it jamón y melón, which is jamón, which is spelled Jamon, is like their word for prosciutto, or like a smoked ham. And then melón. And that, it's so delicious. You wouldn't think that it would pair well together, but the flavors actually, the salty goes really well with the mild sweet, especially with honeydew. I find it's the best with honeydew. So if you ever want to be bougie, you can try that as well. Just another way to serve up your melon. But it would essentially be like a slice with the strips of their, you know, the Spanish ham, which they're really famous for. And it's just so good. There we go. Now we're almost done with this. And then we're going to assemble our fruit tray in just a second. We just got to do our little prep first. But it's not too difficult. So we've got all of our honeydew up, essentially. We've got two more pieces. And then...
here's one. Guy says, how about cantaloupe with vanilla ice cream on top?
Oh, I've never had that before, but I feel like that could be really good.
Yeah, I think that would work.
I'm a huge fan of cantaloupe. I know a lot of people don't like it because it is, you know, another term for cantaloupe is muskmelon, and it's got a very musky flavor to it.
Yeah, don't Australians call it rock melon? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I love it, and I mean, my kids all prefer honeydew because honeydew doesn't have a musky flavor. But I think cantaloupe doesn't get the credit it deserves. I think it's delicious. And I think you have to have it fresh. So many, like if you are you go to like, what is it, those like hotels that give you free breakfast in the morning and they always have the melon slices. That melon has been frozen and that does not taste as good as fresh. When they freeze it, it does not have the same flavor profile or the texture. So you got to make sure. You can freeze it, but it just turns into more of a, I want to say like a soggy melon. Just is not as good. But I love it. Most of my family, they don't like it. I also love canary melons, which are a yellow melon, or Crenshaw melons. Those are really delicious as well. You typically can only get them in the summertime when the stores will pick up some more exotic melon types. But those are very, very good as well. They're like, I would say they're kind of like a hybrid between a cantaloupe and a honeydew. So a little bit of muskiness, but still the sweetness of like a honeydew. There we go. I always sit there and I'm like, it'd be cool to grow your own melons, but like pumpkins, melons they are a vine fruit, so they take up so much space in a garden. And and they require a lot of water, just because they're a vine things, just like pumpkins. So we're gonna have those, and then we'll assemble our fruit tray in just a little bit. Let's get all of this melon cut through. I already cut up my pineapple the other day, so we'll use some of that. Pineapple is also one of those ones. I always buy it whole, especially I find that Costco, that one has a spot on it. Costco has great pineapple. It's much better than what you can buy at a regular grocery store. I don't know if it's whatever like species of pineapple they get, but their pineapple is always very sweet and juicy. Where I find sometimes the fresh ones that I get at the grocery store aren't as sweet. But I always cut it up because I can get a whole pineapple from Costco for like $2.99 and cut it up, which is like a fraction of the cost from the grocery store for those cut ones. Or one of our grocery stores has now those like fancy pineapple machines where you can put it in and it will core it and slice it. But the problem is if you pick a bad pineapple, most of the time your pineapples aren't ripe at the store. Then you have unripe fruit, and once you cut it up, it won't ripen anymore. So I always buy my fruit and let them ripen on the counter, and then I'll cut them when they're ready. Okay, let's assemble our fruit tray. I'm gonna grab out our pineapple and strawberries and some blueberries and raspberries. I'm gonna give this a good stir because we want it to be nice. Okay. I got green grapes also for the Eagles. Strawberries for Kansas City. And let's grab a couple of kiwis. Kiwis for the Eagles as well. And pineapple and raspberries. So we're gonna do our Kansas City fruit tray, or Kansas City Eagles. And we'll put some honeydew in the middle because that's it'll be our pretty. There we go. And then the rest will be prepped for our week.
That's cantaloupe.
This is cantaloupe, I know. It's really funny. So I have dyslexia, and my dyslexia really impacts my speech all the time. My husband says I missay things all the time, or my brain, I feel like, is like 10,000 speeds ahead of where I'm supposed to be at. Okay. I'm gonna give these a good wash. We'll have our nice things. This will be, especially for my little ones, they're gonna love the fruit trays. It adds, whenever I'm doing like a spread, a big one, I like to add the fresh fruit tray because it just kind of cuts through on all the snacky foods. And sometimes when you've had snack overload, fresh fruit is where you want to be. Okay, I think that's enough. And get those. And now we're gonna cut up some kiwis. I use a paring knife for my kiwi because I'm gonna peel it. Some people, my sister, I think it's savage. I could never do it. She literally just cuts her kiwis in half and gives them to her kids. And then you have to eat them out. And I'm like, oh, you're not gonna cut the skin off? Because I can't handle the skin. I think it's gross. But I also don't like peaches because of their fuzzy skin. But her kids have learned to eat the kiwi with the skin on. And I just think that's, heebie-jeebie. Can't do it. So, I feel like we're gonna make our Eagles fans proud over here. We'll put our kiwis on here. Kiwis are also something that are ridiculously expensive for how little fruit you actually get out of a kiwi. They're almost cost $1 a piece, and they're tiny. I do buy most of my kiwi bulk from Costco, but if you have an Aldi's near you, Aldi's sells kiwi fruit for really cheap. It's like $5 for like 3 pounds of it, and you get like a huge tub full. So that's always, I always try to get it there if I go there. I'm always a person who I like to shop around because I'm always looking for the best deals. We'll put some kiwi over here as well. I'm gonna cut up one more kiwi. And we're gonna get this one sliced up. And then we'll do our fruit. Then we have our charcuterie to make and our queso. And then it will be in our dessert tray. It will be presentation time. Chop this up. So we've got our greens over here. There we go. And now we need our reds. So I'm gonna take my strawberries, give them a quick rinse. Strawberries right now, I think, are on sale. Our Valentine's Day is coming up, and everyone uses them for like chocolate dipped strawberries or to make like a Valentine's Day themed dessert. So they are like everywhere right now. Cutting them up, and then we'll add our raspberries and our pineapple, and our fruit tray will be about done. That was a yucky one. There we go. Now we'll put some pineapple in the middle to make a nice, vibrant mixed. Let's see. We've got our fruit. We'll save the rest of our strawberries for later in the week. We're gonna add in some pineapple. This is the pineapple I cut the other day. So we'll throw these on. Beautiful. And we've got some raspberries for our Kansas City. I'm only gonna wash the raspberries I put on. I find if you wash your raspberries and then put them back in the fridge, they turn to mush. So I always wait to wash them until I'm absolutely ready to use them. There we go. We've got Kansas City, and we've got the Eagles. So then we are going to prep our charcuterie, and then we'll have our wings and our thing. Let's see. But I'm almost wondering if we might take a break and come back in a little bit because we have our wings to cut and I've got to clean up some. So I think we're going to pause and we'll come back in like 30 or so minutes. And that way our wings and stuff will be ready, and then we will finish up everything else for our things, our charcuterie, our dessert trays, and whatnot. Okay, well, don't forget to like and subscribe and come back and join us in 30 or so minutes. We'll be back for the rest of our cooking. Okay, guys, thanks for joining us. And again, about 30 or so minutes so we can clean up and prep for the next one.